A young woman arrived by bicycle at the millionaire's mansion, but he froze when he saw the pendant she was wearing. It was the same one he had given his daughter before she disappeared 25 years ago. Arthur Blackwood stood at the window of his study, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the once meticulously maintained gardens. 25 years. 25 years to the day since his world had crumbled beneath his feet. He took a sip of his bourbon. The same ritual he'd performed every evening at precisely 5:47 p.m. The exact time when little Natalie had vanished without a trace. "Will there be anything else, sir?" Henderson, the aging butler who'd been with the family for over 4 decades, stood in the doorway, his posture still impeccable despite his advancing years. "No, Henderson, that will be all for tonight," the butler nodded, hesitating just a moment too long. "Sir, if I may, perhaps tonight you might consider dining in the main hall rather than your study." Arthur's grip tightened on the crystal tumbler. "Not tonight, Henderson. Not tonight. Not on this anniversary." The words he'd repeated year after year, as the mansion around him slowly transformed from a home of joy into a mausoleum of memories. Outside, the rolling hills of the vineyard stretched as far as the eye could see. Blackwood estate wines had once been the pride of the region, their robust reds and delicate whites adorning the tables of the finest restaurants across the country. Now, the business was run by managers. The profits transferred to Arthur's accounts with minimal input from the man himself. He'd lost his taste for wine, for celebration of any kind, on that fateful May afternoon. As the light faded, Arthur moved through the west wing of the mansion, his footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The staff knew better than to light this hallway brightly. He preferred the shadows here, where the family portraits hung in chronological order. His ancestors, stern-faced men and elegant women, watched his nightly pilgrimage with painted eyes. At the end hung the last family portrait: Arthur, his late wife Catherine, and little Natalie, just 5 years old, her blonde curls caught in the sunlight, her smile revealing a missing front tooth. Catherine had died 3 years before Natalie's disappearance, a swift and merciless cancer that had left Arthur a single father, and then the unthinkable happened, leaving him entirely alone. Arthur paused, as he always did. Before turning the handle to Natalie's bedroom, the door opened with a familiar creak. He'd forbidden the staff from oiling the hinges, wanting everything to remain exactly as it had been. The room was immaculate, preserved like a museum exhibit. A stuffed bear sat propped against the pillows, a children's book open on the nightstand, a pair of tiny slippers beside the bed, waiting for feet that had long since outgrown them. "Sleep well, my angel," he whispered into the emptiness, the words a hollow echo of the bedtime ritual they'd once shared. He closed the door quietly and continued down the hall to the terrace that overlooked the eastern gardens, Catherine's pride and joy, and the scene of the tragedy in the years following Natalie's disappearance. He'd let the once vibrant garden fall into disrepair. Now, overgrown rose bushes reached like desperate hands toward the sky, their thorns defending dreams long abandoned. Mr. Blackwood, Martha, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since before Natalie was born, stood at the terrace entrance. "Your dinner is ready, sir." Arthur nodded without turning. "Leave it in the study, please." "Sir, if I may, Detective Winters called again today." Arthur's shoulders tensed. Richard Winters had been a rookie cop when Natalie disappeared. Even after the official investigation was closed, Winters had never given up. Calling dutifully every few months with updates that led nowhere, he'd retired from the force years ago, but still pursued the case privately. What did he want? "He says he has new information. He was quite insistent on speaking with you." Arthur closed his eyes. How many new leads had there been over the years? How many times had hope flickered, only to be extinguished more painfully than before? "Tell him I'll call tomorrow." Martha hesitated. "He left something for you. I've placed it on your desk." After she left, Arthur remained on the terrace until the evening chill forced him inside, in his study. Beside his untouched dinner lay a manila envelope. Against his better judgment, he opened it. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Harold Jennings, now a state senator with rumored aspirations for national office. Arthur's blood ran cold at the sight of his former business partner. Their falling out had been bitter. Arthur had discovered Harold embezzling from their company just weeks before Natalie's disappearance, and had exposed him, resulting in criminal charges that were later dropped due to a technicality. Underneath the clipping was a note in Winter's handwriting. The timing was never a coincidence. "I'm getting closer. Call me." Arthur crumpled the note, tossing it into the fireplace. He'd gone down this road before. Harold was powerful now, virtually untouchable, and accusations without proof had nearly resulted in a devastating libel suit the last time. As the flames consumed the paper, Arthur's gaze fell on a small wooden box on his mantel. Inside lay the match to Natalie's blue rose pendant, a custom piece he'd commissioned for Catherine, who had loved the impossible flower from the moment she'd read about it in a fairy tale. After Catherine's death, he'd had a miniature version made for their daughter. The pendants were unique, crafted by an artisan who had since passed away. He'd never seen another like them. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 9, its deep resonance filling the empty corridors of Blackwood Manor. Another day ending. Another day without answers. Another day alone with ghosts and what-ifs. Arthur poured himself another bourbon and settled into the leather chair that had molded itself to his form over countless solitary evenings. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the neglected garden where his daughter had last been seen playing. Tomorrow, like every day for the past 25 years, Arthur would wake up and continue to exist rather than live, dragging the weight of uncertainty behind him like a condemned man's chains. What he couldn't know was that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would bring a young woman on a rusty bicycle to his gates. Tomorrow would bring the blue rose back into bloom. Morning arrived at Blackwood Manor with the same oppressive routine that had governed it for 25 years. Arthur rose at precisely 6:30, dressed in one of his dozen identical charcoal suits, and took his breakfast on the East Terrace, black coffee and toast that he barely touched. The gardeners were scheduled to arrive at 9,000 for their weekly maintenance of the grounds. Not restoration. Arthur had been clear about that. Just enough work to keep the wilderness at bay. He was reviewing quarterly reports from the vineyard when Henderson appeared at his side. "Excuse me, sir. There's someone at the gate." Arthur didn't look up. "We're not expecting deliveries today." "It's not a delivery, sir. It's a young woman. She's inquiring about work." "Work?" Arthur frowned. "We don't have any positions available." Henderson cleared his throat. "She mentioned the gardening position, sir." "What gardening position?" "The one in the advertisement." Arthur put down his pen. "What advertisement?" "I'm afraid I don't know, sir. Shall I send her away?" Arthur was about to agree when something, perhaps the break in routine, perhaps the ghost of who he used to be before tragedy hardened him, made him hesitate. "No, I'll speak with her." Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly, the most overt expression of surprise he would allow himself. "Very well, sir. I'll bring her to the front gates." 5 minutes later, Arthur stood at the ornate iron gates that separated Blackwood Manor from the outside world. On the other side was a young woman in her mid-20s, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her jeans and flannel shirt were clean but well-worn. Beside her leaned an ancient bicycle that had seen better days, its basket filled with what appeared to be gardening tools. "Mr. Blackwood." Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm Amber Hayes. I came about the gardening position." "There is no gardening position, Miss Hayes. I'm afraid you've been misinformed." She tilted her head, confusion crossing her features. "But the ad in the community bulletin board specifically asked for a gardening assistant at Blackwood Manor." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "See? It has your address and everything." Arthur took the paper, scanning it with growing bewilderment. There it was, a neatly typed notice seeking a gardening assistant with experience in rose cultivation for Blackwood Manor, offering competitive pay and flexible hours. The contact was listed as Martha Williams, his housekeeper. "I see." He folded the paper, making a mental note to have a word with Martha about overstepping her bounds. "This was placed without my knowledge." "Oh," disappointment shadowed her eyes. "I'm sorry to have wasted your time." As she turned to leave, the morning sun caught something around her neck, a flash of blue that made Arthur's heart stop. A pendant, partially hidden beneath her collar, in the unmistakable shape of a rose. "Wait!" The word came out sharper than he intended, making her turn with startled eyes. He modulated his voice, fighting to keep his hands from shaking. "That pendant you're wearing." Amber's hand went instinctively to her throat, pulling out the necklace completely. There it was, a small blue rose, crafted in silver and blue enamel, hanging from a delicate chain, identical to the one in the wooden box on his mantel, identical to the one Natalie had been wearing the day she vanished. This, she looked down at it. It's silly. I know. Blue roses don't even exist naturally. Arthur struggled to find his voice. Where did you get it? Something in his tone made her stiffen. It was a gift. From my mother. She hesitated, then added, well, my adoptive mother. She gave it to me when I turned 18. Said it was with me when they took me in. Adopted. The pendant that shouldn't exist anywhere else. It couldn't be coincidence. Arthur's mind raced. Years of detective consultations and false leads telling him to proceed with caution. The gardening position, he said abruptly. Perhaps I was too hasty. We could use help restoring the eastern garden. Oh, her face brightened. Suspicion instantly replaced by hope. I'd be so grateful for the opportunity. I have experience with roses especially. I've been working at the community garden in town for the past few years. When can you start? Right now, if you'd like. She gestured to her tools. I came prepared just in case. 20 minutes later. Amber was walking the overgrown eastern garden with Martha, who seemed suspiciously unsurprised by the turn of events. Arthur watched from his study window, his mind churning with possibilities and fears. He needed to call Winters, but not yet. First, he needed more information. Who was this girl? Where had she grown up? How had she come to possess Natalie's pendant? And most importantly, was she who Arthur's racing heart desperately wanted her to be? He picked up the phone and dialed the number of a private investigator he'd used in the past. It's Arthur Blackwood. I need a background check. As thorough as possible, on an amber haze. For the first time in 25 years, Arthur Blackwood felt something dangerous stir in his chest. Hope outside. Amber worked steadily, clearing weeds from what had once been a rosebed. She hummed softly to herself, unaware of being observed not only by Arthur, but by a young man approaching from the southern edge of the property. Josh Henderson, the butler's grandson, had arrived earlier than expected for his summer visit. At 26, he was in his final year of medical school, his dark hair falling into intelligent eyes that now fixed curiously on the stranger working in the garden his grandfather had described as forbidden territory. Hello there, he called, setting down his bags. You must be new. Amber looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face and leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Just started today, actually. I'm Amber. Josh Henderson. He extended his hand. My grandfather runs this place. Well, technically Mr. Blackwood does, but Grandpa Henderson keeps it all together. As they shook hands, the blue rose pendant swung forward on its chain, catching the sunlight. Josh's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Growing up spending summers at Blackwood Manor, he'd heard the story of Natalie's disappearance countless times, including the detail about her unique blue rose necklace. That's a beautiful pendant, he said carefully. Never seen anything quite like it. Thanks. Amber tucked it back under her collar automatically. It's kind of my lucky charm. From his window, Arthur watched the two young people talking, an odd sensation of both dread and possibility washing over him. He'd known Josh since he was a child, trusted him implicitly. Perhaps the young man could help keep an eye on Amber without raising suspicion. The investigation into Amber Hayes had begun, and with it, the possibility that the greatest wound in Arthur Blackwood's life might finally begin to heal, or tear open more painfully than ever before. 3 days into Amber's employment at Blackwood Manor, Arthur sat at his desk reviewing the preliminary report from his private investigator. The facts were sparse but intriguing. Amber Hayes, 25, adopted at approximately age 5 by Robert and Ellen Hayes of Millfield, a small town some 200 miles away. Robert had worked as a high school biology teacher until his death 10 years ago. Ellen still lived in the same modest house where Amber grew up. No adoption records had been found yet, a detail that raised red flags. Legal adoptions left paper trails, unofficial ones did not. Arthur glanced out the window at the eastern garden, where Amber worked alongside Josh over the past days. The young man had proven remarkably eager to assist with the garden restoration. Despite having never shown interest in horticulture before, Arthur couldn't help but approve of this development. Josh was likable, smart, and most importantly, someone Arthur trusted to observe and report back. The phone on his desk rang. startling him from his thoughts. "Blackwood, it's Winters. I see you're ignoring my calls again," Arthur sighed. "I've been busy, Richard. Too busy to discuss the fact that Harold Jennings is planning a gubernatorial run. The man who I've always suspected had something to do with Natalie's disappearance is about to gain even more power and influence. We've been over this. Suspicion isn't proof. Well, I might have something closer to proof now. Can we meet?" Arthur hesitated, glancing again at Amber in the garden. "Not right now. I have a situation developing here." There was a pause on the line. "What kind of situation?" "I'm not ready to discuss it. Give me a few days." After hanging up, Arthur retrieved a leather-bound photo album from his safe. He hadn't opened it in years. The memory's too painful to revisit now. He methodically examined each photograph, searching for something he couldn't quite articulate. In the garden, Josh watched Amber kneel beside a tangled rose bush, her hands gentle as she pruned away years of neglect. "This variety is incredible," she said, not looking up. "I've never seen anything like it. The structure suggests it might actually bloom blue without artificial coloring." Josh sat beside her, more interested in her than the plants. "You really know your roses," she smiled, a hint of sadness crossing her features. "They've always felt familiar somehow. My mom, Ellen, used to say I was obsessed with them as a little girl, even before they took me in." "You don't remember anything from before your adoption?" Amber's hand stilled. "Just fragments, dreams, really? A woman singing, a big house?" She shrugged. "Nothing useful. The Hays were told I was found abandoned. That must be hard, not knowing. It's like having a word on the tip of your tongue that you can never quite remember." She glanced toward the mansion. "This place is strange. I keep having the oddest feeling of déjà vu." Josh followed her gaze. "Which parts seem familiar?" "The terrace. And yesterday, when I walked past the west hallway." She stopped abruptly, shaking her head. "It's silly. I've never been here before." That evening, Josh found his grandfather polishing silver in the butler's pantry. "Grandpa, what happened to Natalie Blackwood's nanny? The one who was watching her when she disappeared?" Henderson's hands froze mid-polish. "Miss Lorraine, she had a breakdown after it happened. Last I heard, she was in some facility upstate. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Amber wears a necklace exactly like the one in Natalie's portrait." The old butler's eyes sharpened. "Does Mr. Blackwood know this?" "I think it's why he hired her." Henderson set down the silver. "Be careful, Josh. Mr. Blackwood has spent 25 years searching for answers. If this young woman has given him hope." He didn't finish the sentence. "You think she might be Natalie? I think hope can be more dangerous than despair, especially for a man who's lived with the latter for so long." That night, Amber woke screaming from a nightmare, disoriented in the small guest cottage Arthur had provided for her on the estate. She fumbled for the light switch, heart racing. The dream had been vivid. A man with a scar across his right eyebrow lifting her into a car, whispering that her father had sent him. Then darkness, tears, confusion. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to shake the feeling of dread that clung to her. It was just a dream, triggered by Josh's questions about her past. Nothing more. Outside her cottage, a shadow moved along the perimeter of the estate. A man in a dark coat paused, observing the light in Amber's window before melting back into the darkness. The next morning, Arthur was examining the mysterious newspaper ad that had brought Amber to his door when Martha entered with his coffee. "Martha, did you place this advertisement?" The housekeeper's expression remained neutral. "Yes, sir. Why?" "The Eastern Garden was your wife's pride. It seemed wrong to let it die completely." Arthur studied her face, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. "And you specifically asked for someone with rose experience." Catherine loved her roses. "Martha, how long have you worked for this family?" 37 years. "Sir, then I think you owe me the truth. Why now? Why this particular girl?" Martha's composure slipped slightly. "I saw her in town last week, at the farmer's market. She was helping at the community garden stall. When she turned, I saw the pendant." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I knew that necklace. Mr. Blackwood, I was there the day you gave it to Natalie." Arthur's hands gripped the edge of his desk. "So you lured her here. I created an opportunity. What you make of it is your choice." After Martha left, Arthur returned to the photo album, flipping through until he found what he was looking for. A family picnic. 6 months before Natalie's disappearance, in the background, partially obscured by a tree, stood Harold Jennings, watching the family with an expression Arthur had never noticed before. Cold, calculating. On the next page was a photo of Catherine with her arms around a young woman, her sister, Emma, who died in a car accident shortly after Natalie's birth. The resemblance between Emma and Amber was subtle, but undeniable. Arthur closed the album, a chill running down his spine. The connections were adding up. Too many to be coincidence, but he needed more than hunches and resemblances outside. Under the midday sun, Josh and Amber had uncovered a small stone bench hidden beneath years of overgrowth. "There's an inscription," Josh said, brushing away dirt and lichen. Amber leaned closer, reading aloud. "For Catherine, who found beauty even in the impossible. May your blue roses always bloom." The words triggered something, a flash of memory so vivid it made her gasp. A woman with auburn hair like her own, holding her on this very bench, pointing to rose bushes heavy with flowers and saying, "Look, Natalie, they're blooming just for you." Josh caught her as she swayed. "Amber, are you okay?" I don't know." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I think I remembered something, but it doesn't make sense. I've never been here before." From his study window, Arthur watched the scene unfold, unaware that elsewhere, Harold Jennings was reviewing a report from his own surveillance team. Subject has made contact with Blackwood. Surveillance continues. The past was stirring. Secrets buried for 25 years were beginning to surface, and the blue rose pendant gleamed in the sunlight, a beacon calling its wearer home. Josh paced his room in the west wing of the mansion, unable to shake the image of Amber's face as she'd read the inscription on the stone bench. The flash of recognition in her eyes had been unmistakable. Followed by confusion and fear, his grandfather's warning echoed in his mind. Hope can be more dangerous than despair. But what if this wasn't false hope? What if Amber was actually Natalie Blackwood? Josh pulled out his laptop and typed Natalie Blackwood disappearance into the search bar. Hundreds of results appeared. News articles, forum discussions, even a true crime podcast episode. The case had captured national attention in its day. One article included a photo of Natalie on her 5th birthday, just weeks before she vanished. Josh studied it, comparing the child's features to Amber's. The eyes were similar, unusually deep-set and expressive. It wasn't conclusive, but it was enough to keep him digging. A knock at his door interrupted his research. "Come in," he called, closing the laptop. His grandfather entered, carrying a small leather-bound book. "I found something you should see," Henderson said, his voice low. "When we were clearing out the old storage room last year, I set this aside, thinking Mr. Blackwood might want it someday, but I never found the right moment to give it to him." He handed Josh the book. "It's Miss Lorraine's diary. She was Natalie's nanny." Josh took it carefully. "Have you read it?" "Only enough to know it contains things Mr. Blackwood should see. But in light of recent developments," he looked meaningfully at Josh, "perhaps you should look at it first." After his grandfather left, Josh opened the diary. The early entries were mundane. Notes about Natalie's schedule, her favorite foods, her progress with reading. After Catherine Blackwood's death, the entries became more personal, as the nanny found herself taking on a more maternal role. Then, about a month before the disappearance, the tone changed dramatically. May 3rd. Mr. Jennings visited again today. He asked to see Natalie, but Mr. B was out. I said, "No, don't trust the way he looks at her, like she's something he wants to take." May 10th. Strange phone call today. Man asking if I'm happy working for Blackwood, offered better opportunities. Hung up. May 15th. Someone was watching the house tonight. Saw a shadow by the garden gate. Called security, but they found nothing. The final entry was dated the day before Natalie's disappearance, May 21st. Natalie had another nightmare about the bad man taking her away. She's been having these dreams for weeks now. Mr. B thinks it's just processing her mother's death, but I'm not so sure. She keeps saying the bad man is coming for her. I'm taking her to the Eastern Garden tomorrow. The roses are blooming, and they always cheer her up. Josh closed the diary, his heart racing. This was the first tangible evidence supporting the theory that Natalie's disappearance was not random, that Harold Jennings might have been involved. He needed to show this to Arthur Blackwood. But first, He wanted to know more about the nanny. "Grandpa," Josh called, finding Henderson in the kitchen. "What happened to Miss Lorraine after Natalie disappeared?" The old butler sighed. "She was with Natalie when it happened. Stepped away for just a moment to answer the phone. And when she returned, Natalie was gone. The police questioned her extensively, but she had no information. The guilt destroyed her. She had a breakdown. Kept insisting she heard Natalie crying, but couldn't find her." He shook his head sadly. "Last I heard, she was in Pinewood Psychiatric Facility. Never recovered, poor woman. Is she still there? As far as I know, Mr. Blackwood used to visit her every year on Natalie's birthday, but she rarely recognized him. He stopped going about 10 years ago. Said it was too painful for both of them." That afternoon, Josh approached Arthur in his study, the diary clutched in his hand. "Mr. Blackwood, there's something you need to see." Arthur listened silently as Josh explained where the diary had come from and what it contained. When Josh finished, Arthur took the book with trembling hands. "I'd like to be alone with this," he said quietly. "Of course." Josh turned to leave, then hesitated. "Sir, I think we should visit Miss Lorraine. There might be more she knows, even if she can't express it coherently." Arthur looked up, his eyes haunted. You'll need someone with medical training to help evaluate her mental state, and..." Josh took a deep breath. "I think Amber's presence might trigger memories. If she is Natalie, Miss Lorraine might recognize her. That's a big if, Josh, and a big risk. But the diary, the pendant, the way she reacted to the inscription on the bench, it's adding up." Arthur was silent for a long moment. "Make the arrangements, but don't tell Amber why we're really going. Just say we're visiting an old family friend who's unwell." The next morning, Arthur, Josh, and a confused but willing Amber drove the 2 hours to Pinewood Psychiatric Facility, a sprawling complex of brick buildings surrounded by lush gardens. "Who exactly are we visiting?" Amber asked as they approached the main entrance. "Her name is Charlotte Lorraine," Arthur said, his voice carefully controlled. "She worked for our family for many years." Inside, they were led to a sunlit room where a thin woman in her 60s sat in a rocking chair, staring out the window. Her gray hair was neatly styled, but there was a vacant quality to her gaze that spoke of a mind not fully present. "Miss Lorraine," Arthur said gently. "It's Arthur Blackwood. I've brought some friends to visit you." The woman turned slowly, her eyes passing over Arthur without recognition, then moving to Josh and finally to Amber. When she saw the young woman, Charlotte Lorraine's entire body went rigid, her eyes widened, and she let out a soft cry. "The blue rose," she whispered, her gaze fixed on Amber's pendant, which had slipped out from beneath her blouse. "You found it. You found her." Amber shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, I don't..." "Natalie," Charlotte breathed, rising shakily from her chair. "Little Natalie." "You've come back." Amber looked at Arthur in confusion, but his attention was entirely on the older woman, who was now approaching Amber with trembling hands outstretched. "She cried for her mother," Charlotte said, her voice taking on a sing-song quality. "The bad man said to be quiet, but she cried for her mother. I heard her, but I couldn't find her. He took her away in a black car." "Who, Miss Lorraine?" Arthur asked urgently. "Who took her?" But Charlotte's moment of lucidity was fading. Her eyes clouded over, and she began to rock back and forth. "The rose, the blue rose. She was wearing it when he took her. She cried for her mother." A nurse appeared at the doorway. "I think that's enough for today. She gets agitated easily." As they were leaving, Charlotte suddenly called out, her voice clear again. "The scar. The bad man had a scar over his eye, like lightning." In the car, silence hung heavy between them. Finally, Amber spoke. "Who's Natalie? And why did she think I was her?" Arthur and Josh exchanged glances. "Natalie was my daughter," Arthur said after a long pause. "She disappeared 25 years ago, when she was 5 years old." "I'm so sorry." Amber's hand went instinctively to her pendant. "And this necklace is identical to the one she was wearing the day she vanished." Arthur's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "A blue rose pendant I had custom made for her." "Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand what's happening here." Amber's voice trembled slightly. "Are you saying you think that I might be your daughter?" The car filled with the weight of the unspoken possibility. Outside the windows, the countryside rolled by, oblivious to the lives being upended within. "I don't know what I'm saying," Arthur finally answered, his voice rough with emotion. "But I intend to find out." The drive back from Pinewood was tense with unspoken questions. Amber stared out the window, her reflection pale against the passing landscape. Her fingers repeatedly touched the blue rose pendant at her throat, a gesture Arthur couldn't help but notice. When they arrived at Blackwood Manor, Amber stepped out of the car and looked up at the mansion with new eyes. "I need some time alone," she said softly, "to process everything." Arthur nodded, watching her walk toward her cottage. The way she moved, the slight tilt of her head, so reminiscent of Catherine that it made his chest ache. "Do you think she believes it's possible?" Josh asked, coming to stand beside him. "I don't know, but Charlotte Lorraine recognized her, even in her confused state." "The scar she mentioned," Josh said. "Does that mean anything to you?" Arthur's face darkened. "Harold Jennings has a scar over his right eye. Got it in a bar fight in college. I'd forgotten about it until now." They parted ways, Josh heading to his room to document everything they'd learned, Arthur retreating to his study. But instead of pouring his customary bourbon, Arthur found himself drawn to a trunk in the corner, one he hadn't opened in years. Inside were Catherine's belongings, the things he couldn't bear to look at after her death, but couldn't bring himself to discard. Photo albums, her favorite books, a silk scarf that somehow still held a trace of her perfume. Beneath them lay a small wooden box containing a vintage music box. Arthur wound the key and lifted the lid. The delicate melody of Brahms's lullaby filled the room, Catherine's favorite song to sing to Natalie at bedtime. In the guest cottage, Amber sat on her bed, head in her hands. The visit to Pinewood had unleashed something inside her, fragmented images that felt like memories but couldn't possibly be hers. A woman's face, blurred but loving. This very mansion, seen from a different perspective, as if she were smaller. The garden, vibrant with roses, not overgrown as it was now. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself. "I'm not Natalie Blackwood. I can't be." But then why did Charlotte Lorraine's mention of a man with a scar trigger such visceral fear? Why had she dreamt of exactly that? A man with a lightning-shaped scar over his eye, before ever hearing the nanny mention it. Unable to sit still with her churning thoughts, Amber left her cottage and walked toward the main house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds. Without consciously deciding to, she found herself drawn to the west wing of the mansion. She'd been instructed to stick to the eastern garden and the kitchen entrance, but something pulled her forward now. She entered through a rarely used side door and found herself in a dimly lit corridor lined with portraits. Halfway down the hall, she stopped abruptly before a family portrait. Arthur, a beautiful auburn-haired woman who must be his late wife, and between them, a small girl with blonde curls and a familiar blue pendant. Amber's heart hammered against her ribs. The child's face was like looking into a mirror to her own past. "That's Catherine," came Arthur's voice from behind her, making her jump. "And Natalie. The portrait was painted 6 months before Catherine died." "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be in here," Amber began. But Arthur shook his head. "It's all right. I think perhaps it's time you saw more of the house." His voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes never left her face, watching for reactions. "Would you like me to show you around?" Something in his manner told Amber this was important. A test. "Perhaps," she nodded. Arthur led her through the mansion, pointing out rooms and sharing bits of family history. When they reached a door at the end of the hall, he paused. "This was Natalie's room. I've kept it just as it was." He pushed open the door, and Amber stepped inside. The room was frozen in time, a little girl's kingdom of stuffed animals, picture books and colorful toys, a canopy bed with a pink comforter, a dollhouse in the corner that was a perfect miniature of Blackwood Manor itself. Amber moved through the space as if in a trance, touching objects with a strange reverence. When she reached the dollhouse, she knelt before it, her fingers hovering over the tiny furniture. Without thinking, she reached behind the miniature couch and pressed a hidden latch. A secret compartment in the dollhouse wall swung open. Arthur's sharp intake of breath made her look up. "How did you know that was there?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Amber stared at her hands in shock. I don't know, I just knew." Inside the compartment was a child's treasure trove. A shiny pebble, a blue feather, and a small key. "The music box," Arthur whispered. Amber stood abruptly, backing away from the dollhouse. "I should go. This is too much." She fled the room, her heart racing, and didn't stop until she reached her cottage. Inside, she collapsed onto her bed, her mind reeling. How had she known about the secret compartment? It wasn't possible unless... A knock at her door startled her. It was Josh, holding a steaming mug. "Thought you might need some tea," he said gently. "My grandfather said you looked upset when you ran out." Amber took the mug with trembling hands. "Thanks." Josh sat beside her on the small porch. "Want to talk about it?" "I don't know what's happening to me," she confessed. "I'm having these flashes, images, feelings of recognition, but they can't be memories because I've never been here before." She looked at him desperately. "Right." Josh chose his words carefully. "The mind is complicated. Sometimes trauma can fragment memories, especially in children. You think I might actually be her, Natalie? I think it's worth considering the possibility." Amber stared into her tea. "If I am, then everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie. And someone took me from my real family." Her voice hardened. "Someone stole my life." Back in the mansion, Arthur sat at his desk, the small key from the dollhouse now opening the music box. As Brahms's lullaby played, he made a call to Richard Winters. "It's Arthur. I need everything you have on Harold Jennings. Every suspicion, every lead, every connection to my daughter's case." "What's happened?" Winters asked, instantly alert. "I think she's come home, Richard. I think Natalie has come home." The next morning, Amber woke from another dream, more vivid than before in it. She'd been sitting on the stone bench in the garden with the auburn-haired woman from the portrait. They were making daisy chains, and the woman was singing, the same melody that had been playing in Natalie's room the day before. Amber hummed the tune as she dressed, the notes coming easily to her lips, though she was certain she'd never heard the song before yesterday when she stepped outside. She was startled to find a black sedan parked across the street from the estate. As she watched, a man inside the car raised a camera with a telephoto lens and pointed it directly at her. By the time Josh arrived with coffee, the car was gone. "I think someone was photographing me," she told him. Describing the car, Josh's expression grew serious. "We should tell Mr. Blackwood." "No," Amber said firmly. "First, I want to visit Ellen Hayes, my adoptive mother. If I'm going to unravel what's happening, I need to start with what she knows about where I came from." Josh hesitated, then nodded. "I'll drive you. When do you want to go?" "Tomorrow," Amber decided. "There's something I need to do first." After Josh left, Amber returned to the garden and the stone bench. She sat exactly where she'd been in her dream, closed her eyes, and began to hum the lullaby, letting the melody wash over her. She opened herself to whatever memories might come. Slowly, like a photograph developing, an image formed in her mind. The woman, Catherine, was looking over her shoulder in alarm. A man was approaching through the garden, a man with a scar over his right eye. "Time to go, Natalie," he was saying, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. "Your daddy sent me to pick you up." Amber's eyes flew open, her heart racing. It wasn't just a dream or imagination. It was a memory. She was Natalie Blackwood, and she was beginning to remember who had taken her away. The drive to Millfield was quiet, with Josh behind the wheel and Amber lost in thought beside him. She hadn't told him about her memory of the man with the scar. It felt too raw, too personal to share just yet. Instead, she'd simply said she needed answers from Ellen Hayes. "Are you sure you don't want Mr. Blackwood to come along?" Josh asked, breaking the silence. Amber shook her head. "No, I need to do this myself first." She twisted the blue rose pendant between her fingers. "If Ellen has been keeping the truth from me all these years..." She didn't finish the sentence. The implications were too painful to voice. Millfield was a small town with a single main street lined with family-owned businesses. The Hayes home sat on a quiet street of modest houses, its white paint peeling slightly, and the garden meticulously maintained, Ellen's pride and joy. As Josh parked in the driveway, Amber felt a strange disconnect. This had been her home for as long as she could remember, yet now it seemed unfamiliar, as if she were seeing it through someone else's eyes. "Do you want me to wait in the car?" Josh asked. "No," Amber replied. suddenly afraid to face this alone. "Please come with me." Ellen Hayes was tending her front flower beds when they approached. At 62, she was still spry, her gray hair cut in a practical bob. When she saw Amber, her face lit up, then quickly registered concern. "Amber, what a lovely surprise." She embraced her daughter, then stepped back, studying her face. "Is everything all right? You usually call before visiting." "I need to talk to you about something important, Mom," Amber said, the word mom feeling strange on her tongue for the first time in her life. Inside, the house was exactly as Amber remembered. Comfortable, modest, filled with photos of her growing up, school pictures, sports teams, graduation, a documented childhood that suddenly felt like a carefully constructed facade. "Mom, this is Josh Henderson," Amber introduced after they'd settled in the living room. "He's a friend from my new job." Ellen's eyebrows rose. "New job? When did this happen?" "About a week ago. I'm working as a gardener at an estate called Blackwood Manor." The color drained from Ellen's face. Her hand, reaching for her tea, froze mid-air. "Blackwood Manor," she repeated, her voice barely audible. Amber and Josh exchanged glances. Ellen's reaction confirmed what they had suspected. She knew something. "Mom, I need to know the truth. Where did I come from? And don't tell me I was abandoned. I don't believe that anymore." Ellen set down her teacup with trembling hands. "Why are you asking this now after all these years?" "Because strange things have been happening since I started working at Blackwood Manor. I'm having memories I shouldn't have. A woman in a psychiatric facility recognized me." Amber took a deep breath. "And the man who owns the estate believes I might be his daughter who disappeared 25 years ago." Ellen closed her eyes, as if in pain. "Oh, Amber, is it true?" Amber pressed. "Am I Natalie Blackwood?" Ellen rose shakily from her chair and went to an old secretary desk in the corner of the room. From a hidden drawer, she extracted a small wooden box. "Robert wanted to tell you when you turned 18, she said, referring to her late husband. "I couldn't bear to. I was afraid of losing you." She handed the box to Amber. "Everything we know is in here." With trembling fingers, Amber opened the box. Inside lay an envelope, yellowed with age, and a newspaper clipping about Natalie Blackwood's disappearance. The article included a photo of the missing child wearing the same blue rose pendant that now hung around Amber's neck. She opened the envelope and unfolded a handwritten letter. "Robert and Ellen. The child's name is Natalie Blackwood. She was taken from her father, who is a dangerous and abusive man. Her mother is dead. Natalie needs a good home with good people. I've watched you for months. I know you've been trying to adopt without success. This is your chance to have the child you've always wanted. Do not go to the police. Do not try to find me or contact the Blackwoods. If you do, I'll come back and take her away again. And next time, she won't be given to a loving family. Raise her well. Give her a new name. Never tell her where she came from. Her safety depends on it. The necklace is the only thing from her past that she should keep. Tell her it was a gift from her birth mother. That much at least is true." The letter was unsigned. Amber read it twice, her mind struggling to process the implications. "Who gave me to you?" she finally asked, her voice hollow. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "A man. We never knew his name. He approached Robert after school one day, said he knew we'd been trying to adopt. A week later, he brought you to us. Her voice broke. "We knew it was wrong, but we wanted a child so badly, and you seemed frightened, confused. The man said you'd been abused, that we were saving you. And you believed him?" Josh asked incredulously. "We wanted to," Ellen admitted, shame evident in her voice. "And then we fell in love with you," she said to Amber. "You became our whole world. The thought of losing you, of you being taken back to what we'd been told was an abusive home." She shook her head. "We convinced ourselves we were protecting you." Amber sat very still, processing everything. Did this man have a scar over his right eye? Ellen looked surprised. "Yes, like a lightning bolt. How did you know?" The confirmation sent a chill down Amber's spine. Her fragmented memory was real. "And you never questioned what he told you?" "Never looked into the Blackwood family. Robert did. Secretly," Ellen confessed. "He found nothing to suggest Arthur Blackwood was abusive. But by then, years had passed. We'd committed a crime. harboring a kidnapped child. We were afraid of going to prison, of you being put in the system." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And selfishly, we were afraid of losing you." Silence filled the room. Finally, Amber spoke, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I need the man's description, everything you can remember about him, and I need any other information you have. When exactly he brought me to you, what I was wearing, what I said." "Amber," Ellen pleaded, reaching for her hand. "I'm so sorry. We thought we were doing what was best for you." Amber pulled her hand away. "My name is Natalie," she said quietly, "and I need to go home now, my real home." The drive back to Blackwood Manor was tense. Amber— "No, Natalie," she corrected herself, stared at the letter in her hands, trying to reconcile her two identities. "Are you okay?" Josh asked gently. "I don't know what I am," she replied honestly. "I grew up as Amber Hayes. I have Amber's memories, Amber's experiences, but I was born Natalie Blackwood. I have her blood, her pendant, and now, pieces of her memories returning." She looked at him, lost. "Who am I supposed to be now?" Josh reached over and took her hand. "Whoever you want to be. Your name doesn't define you. Your past doesn't have to dictate your future." As they turned into the long driveway of Blackwood Manor, Natalie felt a strange sense of homecoming. The imposing mansion, which had seemed so foreign just days ago, now beckoned to her. Somewhere inside was a father who had spent 25 years searching for her, a father she was only beginning to remember. "I need to show this to Mr. Blackwood, to my father," she said, clutching the letter. "And then we need to find the man with the scar, the real kidnapper." Her voice hardened with resolve. "Harold Jennings has to pay for what he did to us." What she didn't know was that back at the mansion, Arthur Blackwood had just received a disturbing phone call from Richard Winters. The detective had uncovered evidence that Harold Jennings had learned about Natalie's presence at Blackwood Manor, and if their suspicions were correct, if Jennings was indeed behind the original kidnapping, then Natalie's life was in danger once again. The black sedan that had photographed her was just the beginning. The past wasn't finished with them yet. Arthur Blackwood paced the foyer of the mansion, anxiety radiating from every movement. He checked his watch for the third time in as many minutes, then glanced out the window at the long driveway. Still no sign of Josh's car. "They should have been back by now," he muttered to Henderson, who stood nearby with practiced stillness. "I'm sure they're fine, sir. The drive to Millfield takes nearly 2 hours each way." Arthur was about to respond when his cell phone rang. Detective Winters' name flashed on the screen. "Richard, tell me you have good news." "Not exactly." Winters' gruff voice was tense. "Harold Jennings made some interesting phone calls last night. I've got a source in the telecom company who owes me a favor." Arthur's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of calls?" "First to a security firm that specializes in corporate espionage, then to a lawyer who handles witness relocations, and then to his pilot. His private jet is being prepped for a flight to Switzerland. He's planning to run. Only if he feels threatened, Arthur. I think he knows Natalie is at your house." Arthur moved to the window, scanning the grounds. "I need security here now. Already on it. I've called some ex-colleagues from the force. They'll be there within the hour. Off the books until then. Keep your eyes open." After hanging up, Arthur turned to Henderson. "Get the security cameras back online, all of them, and I want all staff on high alert." The butler nodded. "And what about Martha, sir? She's been acting strangely today." Arthur frowned. "What do you mean?" "She received a phone call this morning and has been making frequent checks of the grounds since then. When I asked her about it, she seemed evasive." Arthur's instincts, honed by 25 years of waiting for the other shoe to drop, immediately flared with warning. Martha had been with the family for decades, but so had Harold Jennings before he betrayed them. "Keep an eye on her," he ordered, discreetly. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. Josh's car had arrived. Arthur hurried outside, relief washing over him as he saw both young people exit the vehicle safely, but the expression on Amber's, no, Natalie's, face told him everything even before she approached with a small wooden box clutched in her hands. "I know who I am," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "And I know what happened to me." Inside Arthur's study, Natalie placed the letter on his desk. Arthur read it twice, his face hardening with each word. This is how they justified stealing you, he said, anger coloring his voice, by painting me as some kind of monster. Ellen Hayes described the man who brought me to them, Natalie said. The scar over his right eye matches what Charlotte Lorraine remembered. And I've started having memories of him too. Standing in the garden, telling me my father had sent him. Arthur sank into his chair, the weight of confirmation heavy on his shoulders. Harold Jennings? It has to be. But why? Josh asked. What could he possibly gain from kidnapping a 5-year-old girl? Arthur's eyes darkened. Revenge. A few months before Natalie disappeared, I discovered Harold was embezzling from our company. Millions of dollars, siphoned into offshore accounts. I turned him in, testified against him. He would have gone to prison if his family's connections hadn't helped him escape with just a fine and community service. He looked at Natalie. I destroyed his reputation, his career. So he took the thing I loved most. And now he knows I'm here, Natalie said quietly. Arthur and Josh exchanged a look. What aren't you telling me? She demanded. Arthur sighed. Detective Winters called. Jennings has been making suspicious calls, preparing his private jet. He knows you're here, and he's either planning to run or to eliminate the threat you pose to him. If I'm found alive after all these years, people will ask questions, Natalie reasoned. The statute of limitations might have expired on the kidnapping, but if he was involved in something else illegal at the time, his political career would be over, Josh finished. And he's planning to announce his run for governor next month. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, Arthur stood. You're not safe here. Not until we have enough evidence to bring him down. We need to get you somewhere secure until Winters arrives with reinforcements. I'm not hiding, Natalie said firmly. I've been hidden away for 25 years. No more running. Before Arthur could argue, Henderson appeared at the door, his usual composure visibly shaken. Sir, you need to come quickly. It's Martha. She's collapsed in the kitchen. They rushed to the kitchen to find the housekeeper on the floor. Her breathing shallow, her skin clammy. Josh immediately knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Her heart rate is elevated and her pupils are constricted, he reported, slipping into clinical mode. Martha, can you hear me? Can you tell us what happened? Martha's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Arthur. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know who she was, he said, looking for old friends. Who, Martha? Arthur urged. Who were you talking to? Man with the scar gave me money just to report if anyone came looking. Her voice was fading. Put something in the tea. Josh's head snapped up. The tea. Did you drink any? He asked Natalie urgently. She shook her head. No, I haven't had anything since we got back. Call an ambulance, Josh ordered, loosening Martha's collar. Tell them possible poisoning, likely a sedative or worse. As Arthur made the call, Natalie searched the kitchen, finding a teapot still warm on the counter. She must have made this for us, she said, the reality of the situation sinking in. If we had come straight to the kitchen instead of going to your study. She's been his informant all along, Arthur said bitterly, hanging up the phone. For 25 years. She's been watching me, reporting back to him. Not all along, Martha managed, her voice barely audible. Just after, he threatened. My sister's children, she gasped for breath, came back. When the girl arrived, said, tie up loose ends. Her eyes rolled back, and Josh quickly positioned her in the recovery position. The ambulance is on its way, Arthur said. But we can't stay here. If Jennings knows his plan failed, he'll try something else. A crash from the front of the house cut through the tension. The sound of breaking glass followed by heavy footsteps. Too late, Josh whispered, instinctively pulling Natalie behind him. They're already here. Arthur moved swiftly to a cabinet, retrieving a small handgun. Kitchen door now, he ordered in a hushed voice. Get to the garage. The keys to the Range Rover are in the ignition. They slipped out the back. Just as voices approached the kitchen, in the gathering dusk, they hurried across the grounds toward the detached garage, keeping low and using the overgrown garden for cover. As they reached the garage, a shot rang out, splintering wood near Arthur's head. He pushed Natalie and Josh forward, turning to return fire. providing cover as they scrambled into the vehicle. The Range Rover's engine roared to life, and Josh threw it into reverse. Crashing through the garage doors, Arthur leapt in as the vehicle sped past him, bullets pinging off the metal frame. As they raced down the driveway, Natalie looked back at Blackwood Manor, her true childhood home, now under siege. In the fading light, she could make out several dark figures converging on the house. "Where are we going?" Josh asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Old hunting cabin? About 30 miles north," Arthur replied, checking his phone. "No signal. They must be jamming communications. We're on our own until Winters realizes something's wrong." Natalie's hand went to her blue rose pendant, clutching it like a talisman. "All these years," she said quietly, "I thought I was abandoned, unwanted, but he never stopped looking for me, and now he'll never stop hunting you," Arthur said grimly, watching the road behind them. "Harold Jennings can't afford to let you live to tell your story," as the Range Rover disappeared into the gathering darkness. Harold Jennings himself stepped from a black sedan onto the gravel driveway of Blackwood Manor, his scarred face illuminated by the mansion's security lights. 25 years ago, he had orchestrated the perfect revenge. Now, his carefully constructed life was threatened by the ghost of that past success. One way or another, he would ensure that Natalie Blackwood disappeared for good this time. The hunting cabin was little more than a weathered wooden structure nestled among towering pines. Far from the main road, Arthur had maintained it minimally over the years. A refuge he'd never used but couldn't bring himself to sell. Now, as they approached in the darkness, it represented their only sanctuary. "Stay in the car until I check it out," Arthur instructed, his voice tense as he scanned the surroundings. The cabin appeared untouched, a layer of dust covering the sparse furniture inside. Arthur signaled the all-clear, and Natalie and Josh hurried from the Range Rover into the relative safety of the small building. "There's a landline," Arthur said, moving to an old rotary phone on the wall. "Let's hope it still works." The dial tone hummed reassuringly as he punched in Winters' number. The detective answered on the second ring. "Winters. It's Arthur. Jennings made his move. Armed men at the mansion. Martha was working for him. She's been poisoned. Jesus, where are you?" "The hunting cabin. We got out just in time." "Stay put. I'm about an hour out with 3 ex-SWAT officers. We'll come to you." After hanging up, Arthur turned to find Natalie examining framed photos on the mantel, faded images of a younger Arthur and Catherine at the cabin, smiling, carefree. "I remember this place," she said softly. "Mom brought me here once when I was very small. We saw a deer right outside the window." Arthur's throat tightened. "Catherine loved it here after she died. I couldn't bear to visit anymore." Josh was checking the cabin's perimeter, drawing curtains and testing locks. "We should be safe until Detective Winters arrives. But we need a plan for after that. Jennings won't stop coming after us." "We need proof of what he did," Arthur said. "The letter from the Hayes family is circumstantial at best. We need something that directly ties Jennings to the kidnapping." Natalie sat on the worn sofa, absently touching her pendant. "Ellen Hayes said the man who brought me to them contacted Robert at the school where he taught. There might be security footage, visitors' logs. After 25 years? Unlikely," Arthur said grimly. "What about Martha?" Josh suggested. "If she survives, she could testify that Jennings contacted her." Again, her word against his. "We need hard evidence." Arthur paced the small room. "Jennings is too careful to leave a paper trail, but he might have kept something. A trophy or record of his triumph over me." Natalie looked up sharply. "The pendant. He took me. But he let me keep the pendant. Why?" "To torment me," Arthur theorized. "Knowing you were out there somewhere, wearing it, but I couldn't find you. Or as proof," Josh said, the realization dawning. "Insurance that he could always prove who you were if needed." A heavy silence fell as they contemplated the implications. Harold Jennings had orchestrated a meticulous revenge, stealing Arthur's daughter while leaving him with just enough hope to prolong his suffering. But such elaborate schemes often left evidence, even if it remained hidden for decades. "What about Charlotte Lorraine?" Natalie suggested. She recognized Jennings by his scar. Could her testimony help? "She's mentally unstable," Arthur said. "Any defense attorney would tear her credibility apart." "There must be something," Josh insisted, frustration evident in his voice. 25 years of secrets don't just disappear. A sudden mechanical whirring outside made them freeze. Headlights swept across the cabin windows as a vehicle approached. "That can't be Winters yet," Arthur whispered, reaching for his gun. "He said an hour." "Minimum." Josh peered through a gap in the curtains. "Black SUV, 2 men getting out. Back door," Arthur ordered. "Now." They slipped out the rear of the cabin into the dense woods beyond. The night was moonless, the forest floor treacherous with roots and underbrush. Behind them, they heard the cabin door splinter as it was kicked open. "This way," Arthur whispered, leading them deeper into the trees. They moved as quietly as possible, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant. After what felt like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, they reached a small clearing with a dilapidated shed, a storage facility for hunting equipment that Arthur had forgotten existed. "We can wait here," he said, forcing the rusty door open. "Winters will call when he reaches the cabin and finds us gone." Inside, the shed was musty and cramped, filled with old equipment and dusty canvas tarps. They huddled together in the darkness, listening intently for sounds of pursuit. "I should have seen this coming," Arthur muttered. 25 years, and I still underestimated how far Jennings would go. "You couldn't have known Martha was working for him," Josh reassured him. "I should have. The ad she placed to bring Amber, Natalie, to the house. I never questioned it deeply enough." Natalie reached for her father's hand in the darkness. "You couldn't have known." The simple gesture, this contact between father and daughter after 25 years of separation, momentarily overwhelmed Arthur. He squeezed her hand, unable to speak. The moment was interrupted by the vibration of Arthur's phone. A text message from Winters at cabin. "No sign of you. Men in tactical gear searching woods to north. Position," Arthur quickly replied. "Storage shed, 500 yards south of cabin." 2 armed men pursuing while they waited for Winters' response. Josh shifted uncomfortably. "I've been thinking about Martha," he said quietly. "She said Jennings threatened her sister's children. Why them specifically?" "Martha's sister died young," Arthur explained. "She raised those kids like her own, like Ellen Hayes raised me," Natalie observed. "A pattern of using children as leverage." "It's effective," Arthur acknowledged grimly. "Nothing makes people more compliant than threats to those they love." Josh's eyes widened suddenly. "That's it," he whispered urgently. "Jennings must have something on my grandfather too. He's been at the mansion longer than anyone." "Henderson." Arthur looked shocked. "Impossible. He's been loyal for 40 years, which makes him the perfect long-term asset," Josh argued. "Think about it. Who better to keep tabs on you than your trusted butler? Who would have access to every room, every conversation?" The theory hung heavy in the air, disturbing in its plausibility. "If you're right," Arthur said slowly, "then Jennings has likely been gathering information on me for decades, which means he might have kept records," Natalie finished. "Documentation of his revenge." A new text from Winters arrived. "Coming to you, stay hidden. 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes stretched like hours as they huddled in tense silence. When they finally heard footsteps approaching, Arthur raised his gun defensively. "Arthur," came Winters' hushed voice. "It's me." The detective's weathered face appeared in the doorway, relief washing over it at the sight of them unharmed. Behind him stood 3 men with professional bearing and concealed weapons. "My team has secured the area," Winters reported. "The 2 men searching for you have been convinced to leave, but there will be more. We need to get somewhere safe," Arthur said. "And we need to find proof of what Jennings did." Winters nodded. "I've got a safe house prepared, and I've been doing some digging into Jennings's finances from around the time of the kidnapping. There were some interesting cash withdrawals, payments to someone identified only as caretaker in his private records. The Hayes family," Josh suggested. "No," Winters said grimly. "The payments continued monthly for years. I think caretaker was whoever Jennings hired to watch over the situation, to make sure the secret stayed buried." "Henderson," Arthur said, the betrayal evident in his voice. "It has to be." As they moved cautiously through the woods toward Winters' vehicles, Natalie felt the weight of 25 years of deception pressing down on her. Her entire life had been built on lies, her identity hidden even from herself, and somewhere out there, Harold Jennings was still plotting to silence her permanently. The blue rose pendant felt heavy against her chest, no longer a mysterious keepsake, but a symbol of a truth that could destroy a powerful man. A truth that had already cost one woman her life and now threatened them all. They were playing a deadly game with a man who had spent decades perfecting his strategy. The only question was whether they could find the proof they needed before Jennings found them again. The safe house was an unassuming 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Unmarked and unremarkable, it belonged to a former colleague of Winter's who now worked private security. Inside, the furnishings were sparse but functional. A perfect place to disappear. "No one knows about this location except my team," Winters assured them as they settled in. "We'll be safe here while we plan our next move." Arthur paced the living room, unable to sit still. Henderson's shift ends at midnight. If he's been Jennings' inside man all these years, we need to question him. Confronting him directly could spook Jennings, Winters cautioned. We need to be smarter than that. Natalie, exhausted from the night's events, sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. Josh sat beside her, his presence a silent comfort. "We need leverage," she said suddenly. "Something that would force Jennings to reveal himself." Arthur stopped pacing. "Like what?" "Me." Natalie's voice was steady. "Publicly announcing that Natalie Blackwood has returned, it would force his hand." "Absolutely not," Arthur said sharply. "You'd be painting a target on your back." "I already have one," she countered. "At least this way. We control the narrative." Winters nodded slowly, considering. "She's right. A public statement would put Jennings in a difficult position. He couldn't risk having you disappear again. There would be too many questions. So we use my daughter as bait." Arthur's voice rose in disbelief. "I've only just found her. And you want me to risk losing her again?" "No," Winters said firmly. "Not as bait, as leverage. We announce a press conference for tomorrow morning where Arthur Blackwood will make a statement about his long-missing daughter. We don't actually put Natalie in front of cameras, just the suggestion that revelations are coming. Jennings would have to act quickly," Josh realized. "Before the press conference. And we'll be ready when he does," Winters confirmed. "My team can monitor all approaches to the mansion. When Jennings makes his move, we'll have him." After further discussion, a plan began to take shape. Arthur would return to Blackwood Manor, ostensibly alone. He would make calls to several news outlets, announcing a press conference regarding significant developments. In his daughter's case, Winters and his team would establish surveillance around the property, while Natalie and Josh remained at the safe house with one of Winters' men. "I don't like being sidelined," Natalie protested. "This is my life we're talking about." "Which is exactly why you need to stay safe," Arthur insisted. "If anything goes wrong," the words hung unfinished in the air. After 25 years of separation, the thought of losing her again was unbearable. As dawn approached, they finalized the details. Arthur and Winters would leave in an hour, giving them time to set everything in place before making the announcement. Josh would stay with Natalie, both for her protection and to help her process the flood of recovered memories that continued to surface. "Be careful," Natalie told her father as he prepared to leave. The word father still felt strange on her tongue, but right in her heart, Arthur embraced her, a gesture that bridged decades of absence. "I promise you, this ends today, one way or another." After they left, the safe house felt eerily quiet. Josh made coffee while Natalie stared out the window at the brightening sky. "What happens after?" she asked suddenly. "If we succeed, if Jennings is exposed, what then?" Josh set a steaming mug before her. "You mean for you? For all of us? I've been Amber Hayes my entire conscious life. I don't know how to be Natalie Blackwood." "You don't have to choose," Josh said gently. "You're both. Everything that made you Amber. Your experiences, your choices, your heart, that's still you. Learning you're also Natalie doesn't erase that." She considered this, finding comfort in his words. "And us, whatever this is between us." Josh took her hand. "That's real, whatever name you choose." The moment was interrupted by Josh's phone ringing. Winters calling with an update. "Everything's in place," the detective reported. "Arthur's made the calls. Press conference scheduled for noon. Now we wait." The waiting proved excruciating. Noon approached with agonizing slowness, each minute stretching like an hour. Then, at 11:17 a.m., Josh's phone rang again. "They've spotted movement," Winters said tersely. "3 vehicles approaching the mansion from different directions. One matches the description of Jennings's car." "Is my father safe?" Natalie demanded, leaning toward the phone. "He's secure in the panic room. We're moving in now." The line went dead, leaving them in tense silence. "We should be there," Natalie said, already reaching for her jacket. Winters was clear. "We stay put. That's my father, Josh, and Detective Winters might not know what he's walking into." Jennings has had 25 years to plan for this moment. Josh hesitated, torn between following orders and acknowledging the truth in her words. "Even if I agreed, how would we get there? We don't have a car." Natalie moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the quiet street. "Actually, we do." She pointed to a delivery van parked across the street, the driver approaching a house with a package. "The keys are probably still in the ignition. You're suggesting we steal a delivery van?" "Borrow," she corrected. "It's an emergency." Against his better judgment, Josh found himself following her out the door. The guard Winters had left behind was in the backyard, making a perimeter check. By the time he realized they were gone, they were already halfway to Blackwood Manor in the borrowed vehicle. At the mansion, chaos had erupted. Winters and his team had intercepted 2 of Jennings' men, but the senator himself had somehow slipped through their perimeter. Unknown to them, he had accessed the mansion through an old maintenance tunnel, information provided by Henderson over the years. In the panic room, Arthur was startled by the security monitor showing movement in the house. A figure was approaching, not one of Winters' team but Harold Jennings himself, a gun in his hand. Somehow, Jennings knew the location of the panic room and the override code for the security system. Henderson's betrayal was complete. As Jennings input the code to unlock the panic room door, Arthur prepared himself for the confrontation. 2 decades in the making, the heavy door swung open to reveal his former friend and business partner, the scar above his eye livid against his pale skin. "Hello, Arthur," Jennings said, his voice eerily calm. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Arthur replied, his hand inching toward the drawer where he kept a backup weapon. "Looking for this?" Jennings held up a small handgun, the very one Arthur had been reaching for. Henderson was quite thorough in his information. Outside the mansion, Natalie and Josh abandoned the delivery van at the gates, ducking under the police tape Winters' team had established. They slipped through the gardens, using the overgrown vegetation as cover. "The panic room is in the library," Josh whispered. "Behind the bookcase." They entered through a side door, moving silently through the familiar corridors. The sounds of struggle echoed from elsewhere in the mansion, Winters' team engaging with Jennings' men. As they approached the library, they heard voices, Arthur and Jennings locked in confrontation. Through the partially open door, they could see Jennings holding a gun on Arthur, who stood with his back to the open panic room. "You took everything from me," Jennings was saying. "My reputation, my career, my future. Taking your daughter was just the beginning. Watching you suffer for 25 years, that was the real satisfaction. And now you're going to kill me?" Arthur asked, his voice steady despite the gun aimed at his chest. "Not just you, your daughter too. Once my men find her, a tragic murder-suicide after your mental health deteriorated, the news will run it for days, and no one will ever know the truth." Natalie's blood ran cold. This was the man who had destroyed her life, who had torn her from her real family and created the web of lies she'd lived in for 25 years. Without thinking, she stepped into the doorway. "They'll know now." Jennings whirled, his gun shifting toward this new threat. In that momentary distraction, Arthur lunged forward, grappling for the weapon. The 2 men struggled, a lifetime of hatred fueling their strength. The gun discharged, a deafening report in the confined space, and both men staggered. For a horrifying moment, Natalie thought her father had been shot. Then Jennings collapsed, blood blooming on his shoulder, the gun clattering to the floor. Arthur kicked the weapon away as Josh rushed forward to secure it. Moments later, Winters and his team burst into the room, drawn by the gunshot. "What the hell are you 2 doing here?" the detective demanded, seeing Josh and Natalie. But there was no time for explanations. From his position on the floor, Jennings glared up at them with undisguised hatred. "You have nothing," he spat. "No proof, just the word of a confused young woman against a respected state senator. My lawyers will destroy you." "Actually, came a voice from the doorway. "They won't." Henderson stood there, his normally impeccable posture now stooped with the weight of decades of secrets. In his trembling hands, he held a small recording device. "I've kept records of every conversation for 25 years, the butler said quietly. "Insurance, Mr. Jennings called it. Protection against betrayal." He looked at Arthur with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, sir, he threatened my family, but I can't live with this anymore." As Winter's men led Jennings away, Arthur approached his butler of 40 years. "Why now, Henderson? After all this time?" The old man's gaze shifted to Natalie. "Because she came home, sir, and some sins can't be buried forever." Outside, news vans were already gathering at the gates. Drawn by rumors of developments in the famous Blackwood kidnapping case, the story they would get was far more explosive than they could have imagined. A senator exposed, a long-missing daughter returned, and a quarter-century of deception finally unraveled. For Natalie, standing between her father and Josh as the morning sun illuminated Blackwood Manor. It was the end of one life, and the beginning of another. Amber Hayes would always be part of her, but Natalie Blackwood was finally home. 3 months after Harold Jennings' arrest, Blackwood Manor had transformed. Gone was the mausoleum-like stillness that had defined it for 25 years. Windows that had been perpetually shuttered now stood open, allowing sunlight and fresh air to circulate through rooms long kept in shadow. The sounds of life, conversations, laughter, music, had returned to the grand old house in the eastern garden. Once Catherine Blackwood's pride and joy, Natalie knelt among newly planted rose bushes. Under her careful tending, the garden was coming back to life, much like the mansion itself, and like its caretaker, who was both Amber Hayes and Natalie Blackwood. It honored its past while embracing a new future. "Those are coming along beautifully," Arthur observed, approaching with 2 glasses of lemonade. Catherine would be proud. Natalie accepted the cool drink gratefully, wiping soil from her hands. "I found a specialist nursery that's been developing true blue roses. They're not exactly like the ones Mom loved, but they're close." The word Mom still felt both strange and right on her tongue, a bridge between her 2 lives. In the months since discovering her true identity, Natalie had begun the delicate process of reconciling her past as Amber with her birthright. As Natalie, it wasn't easy, but each day brought new integration, new healing. "The press is finally moving on to other stories," Arthur said, settling on the stone bench that held so many memories. "Jennings's trial date is set for next month." The evidence against the former senator was overwhelming. Henderson's recordings, combined with financial records uncovered in Jennings' home safe, had created an airtight case. The butler, torn between guilt and relief, had provided crucial testimony before accepting a reduced sentence for his role in the decades-long deception. Martha had survived the poisoning, but remained hospitalized. Her sister's children, the leverage Jennings had used to ensure her compliance, had forgiven her, understanding the impossible position she'd been placed in. "Have you thought more about testifying?" Arthur asked carefully. Natalie nodded, her expression resolute. "I need to do it, not just for justice, but for closure. To look him in the eye and show him that he failed, that he couldn't destroy our family permanently." Arthur smiled, pride evident in his eyes. In the daughter who had returned to him, he saw Catherine's strength and determination. The genetic legacy had survived, despite Jennings's best efforts to sever it. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. Moments later, Josh appeared, carrying a small wrapped package. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, approaching the garden. "Never," Natalie replied, her face brightening at his presence. Over the chaotic months following Jennings's arrest, Josh had been Natalie's anchor, helping her navigate press attention, legal proceedings, and the complex emotions of reuniting with her birth father while maintaining a relationship with Ellen Hayes, who remained an important part of her life. "I brought something for the garden," Josh said, handing her the package. A housewarming gift of sorts. Natalie unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small brass plaque mounted on a stake. Engraved on it were the words, "Catherine's Garden, where blue roses bloom." "Josh, it's perfect," she whispered, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Arthur cleared his throat, suddenly emotional. "I'll leave you 2 alone. I have some calls to make." As he walked back toward the house, Josh took Natalie's hand. He's adjusting well to having you back. We both are. It's strange. Building a relationship with a father I don't remember, while keeping ties with the mother who raised me. She placed the plaque beside the freshly planted roses. But we're figuring it out, day by day. Josh's expression grew serious. Speaking of figuring things out, I've been thinking about the future. My residency starts in 3 months. The medical school where Josh had been studying had granted him a compassionate leave to deal with the family crisis. But reality was calling him back. Boston's not that far, Natalie said, trying to sound optimistic, though the thought of him leaving pained her. That's just it. I've been accepted for a transfer to the program at County General. It's only 30 minutes from here. He paused, searching her eyes. If you want me to stay, that is. Natalie set down her gardening tools, fully focusing on him now. Are you sure Boston was your dream program? Dreams change, he said simply. Sometimes they're replaced by better ones. In the golden afternoon light, with the scent of roses surrounding them, Josh dropped to one knee, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, elegant in its simplicity, with a small blue stone at its center. Natalie Blackwood, who is also Amber Hayes, the woman with 2 names and the biggest heart I've ever known. Will you marry me? Tears filled Natalie's eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. As Josh slipped the ring onto her finger, she finally managed, yes, absolutely yes. Their embrace was interrupted by a discreet cough. Henderson, now released pending his testimony and reinstated at Arthur's insistence, stood at the garden path. Pardon the interruption, but Detective Winters has arrived with news he says cannot wait. In the library, the retired detective paced excitedly, barely containing himself until everyone had gathered. We found something in Jennings's offshore accounts, he announced. Payments to a shell company based in Moldova. The company specifically handled international private adoptions. Natalie frowned. What does that have to do with my case? The payments weren't just for you, Winters explained. There were multiple transactions over several years. We think Jennings was involved in other kidnappings. Children taken from families who had crossed him in some way. The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Natalie wasn't Jennings's only victim. How many? Arthur asked, his voice tight. At least 4 other cases that matched the pattern. We're still investigating, but one in particular. Winters hesitated, looking at Natalie. The timing and circumstances suggest a possibility we hadn't considered before. What possibility? She pressed. Catherine had a difficult pregnancy with you, Arthur explained quietly. We were told there had been a twin who didn't survive the birth, but there was confusion at the hospital. A power outage. Records misplaced. You think I have a twin sister? Natalie's hand went to her pendant, the blue rose that had helped lead her home. It's a long shot, Winters cautioned. But there was a girl abducted in similar circumstances about the same time as you, placed with a family in Europe. The payments to her adoptive family stopped last year when she turned 25. The implications hung heavy in the room. Another daughter of Arthur and Catherine Blackwood could be out there, living under a different name, unaware of her true identity. Just as Natalie had been, Arthur moved to the window, staring out at the garden where Natalie had been working, where Catherine had once tended her beloved roses, where a 5-year-old Natalie had played before being snatched away. We'll find her, he said with quiet determination. If she's out there, we'll bring her home too. Natalie joined her father at the window, slipping her hand into his. The blue rose pendant gleamed at her throat, catching the light, a symbol of all that had been lost and found again. Outside, the newly planted garden stretched before them, the tender shoots of blue roses reaching toward the sun. Like the family they were rebuilding, the garden was a testament to resilience, to the power of roots to survive even the harshest winters, waiting patiently for the chance to bloom again.